Good morning, everybody. It's a matter of great honor and pleasure for me to be here and be addressing. And I want to thank Dr. Sacha for having invited me to address you all, which I think it's a big honor for me. I'm a soldier. I'm an infantryman. I'm here. In this time of Corona, when we realize that all the mightiest weapons that we have, our guns and cannons and atom bombs and artillery and everything, nothing can withstand what you guys are facing, actually an invisible virus. And while we are all asked to sit down in the comforts of our home, you're there out in the front lines in the battling this invisible enemy that is taking so many lives, which is far greater than any battle that we've had in the recent past. And the world is facing unprecedented. Worldwide, doctors, healthcare workers, nurses have actually been suffering quite a bit. Almost 20% of them have been casualties to this deadly virus, and I just can salute you. Personally, also, I have a lot of debt of gratitude to doctors. I am in the army. I've seen more hospitals than many doctors themselves because I was wounded very badly. I had 4 bullets in my chest, my arms, and my legs. And my leg was blown off. I had a fracture on my scapula. Then I had my rifle butt hit on my spine. I didn't really have a chance of surviving. I had lost a lot of blood. And of course, like doctors, we are also there to save lives. And we are there. And I knew that when I was in that encounter, it was a very violent workplace. Obviously, someone was trying to kill me. And I was almost killed. And we had also killed someone on the other side. But then there were 2 young children who were wounded in the crossfire. And when I saw them, I realized that we were there to protect them. My oath that I've taken, the Chetwodian oath that we've taken in the military academy, was the safety, honor, welfare of my country comes first, always and every time. Of its own citizens comes next. And my own safety, honor, and welfare comes last, always and every time. So when I saw, while I knew that the guy who fired at me was clearly an opponent, not an enemy. But the fact that these 2 children, who didn't even know which religion or region they belonged to and why they were fighting, I was there to protect them. Just like you are there, you are a savior, you wear white cloaks and you're superheroes for all of us. We may be intimidating, but we are there to protect them. So I just didn't want to be a factor in the reason for their death. And I insisted that they evacuate the 2 children in the helicopter that came, and the villagers were surprised, the militants were surprised, and everyone was surprised. But that's a fact. That's the oath that we've taken, just like your Hippocratic oath. And I have a lot to deep sense of gratitude to the doctors, because when I landed there, finally, when the helicopter came to pick me up, it took me to 155 BH in Dimapur. And the commanding officer was there to receive me. He looked at me, was Colonel Tete. He looked at me and he smiled and patted me, and he says, look up, opened my eyelids and said, I remember this still. He says, Pillay, you got $1 million, and Atlanta Olympics had just got over. And I remember, he said, even if you get the gold medalist from Atlanta and tell him to shoot through you and not to damage you, not to damage your vital organs, not to damage your veins, not to damage your nerves, not to blow up. He says, you can't do it. He's got your $1 million wounds. You're an extremely lucky man. And secondly, he says that you come to us for treatment. That very fact, that the way he talked to me and he encouraged me that I have a lot of hope, it really made a lot of difference to me, that the positive attitude that the doctor communicated. And then I was evacuated to Calcutta the next day for my reconstructive surgery. And again, the reconstructive surgeons were Colonel then Mehta, who became a general later, and Colonel Bardwaj, and again, outstanding people. So he said, what's your favorite sport? He looked at my leg, which was blown apart because the grenade had blasted on its leg. And then he says that, what's your favorite sport? I said, sir, I like running. So he says, very soon you'll have to run away from all the attention you're going to get, because you're a hero, and just make sure that you're good enough to run around. And he says, you come to us, and he's going to make sure that I'm going to be, fighting fit and running again. So I want to say that good communications really makes a difference. Even my own mother, who's a patient of inclusion body myositis, she, we were in the RR hospital where she was diagnosed, and there was this Colonel General Tiwari now, and Colonel now who works in Colonel Dhul, and Colonel Goyal, and a complete team of doctors who would come in. My mother was completely withered, like muscles had all gone, and she couldn't move her own fingers. And then she came and says, "Ma'am, we know we have a solution for you." They started her on IVIG and teriparamide, Fortio, and then, because she had osteoporosis. And then my mother used to be so happy, and she says, "Ma'am, you're the most prettiest patient that I have in this hospital." And she used to just cheer up. She was 70 plus, and she says, "Good." My mother used to just dress up to wait for the doctors on the round, and then she says, "You came in my dream, and God had told me to come to Delhi, and that's why I come here, and now I've seen God when I see you all." So really, for us, a lot of us patients, doctors are God's messenger on earth. You are really superheroes. You are actually, people who give hope. You give us lives. You change our destiny. You, from the brink of death, you bring us back to life. So with all your white cloaks and all those things that you wear around, it really look like, superheroes, like Batman, Superman, those kind of people. And the fact is that we look up to you just like, and so different from us. Like, we only protect people, whereas you give life back to people. That's the difference. You also face a lot of violence in your workplace. There's no denying that. It's, first of all, your workplace is very hazardous. You have not only like working with the hazardous injections and medicines and everything which can be harmful to you if taken wrongly, and then you have radiation and others and sharp objects all around, and there's so many other things that you live in a workplace. And now we've heard of stories of people getting so violent against doctors. In Calcutta last year, then you had that ordinance passed, and then now we had in this present, while you were all battling out, living away from your families, working hard to protect us from an invisible disease, you were all being attacked. Even funerals were being denied to them, and it is kind of it's an absurd where suddenly the hero becomes the villain. It's that kind of a situation with all this. Patients' relatives or patients themselves getting violent. So it's something that is, and this act that they've got, which unfortunately only during the epidemics that they can actually be implemented, is a step in the right direction. So I think that this workplace violence, there is a lot of violence. You also face violence amongst colleagues. I know that there is a lot of rivalry within the system. It's like it's all places. But then facing violence from people whom you were intending to help, it's quite a difficult environment to work. And especially when you need to be operating at the optimum level of your intellect and everything to actually treat us. So I agree with this thing. So, but the fact is that it's a way of the world. It's not just restricted to India. It's not restricted to the South Asian. It is there all over. You have stories of a doctor being killed by the son who walks in because his mother died, and he just goes in and shoots the doctor who treated him. So we hear those kind of things happening in America. So it happens. You have people assaulting nurses. You have people assaulting. So this is something that we have to learn to live with, to understand that. I think the key to all this is communication, the ability to communicate correctly. Like, I would give you an example in my own thing. I was supposed to go, and my commanding officer was about 7 years of service in the army. I think it was 26 or 27 years old. I was told that in this football match that is going on in so-and-so, there's a very important member of an underground outfit. You got to arrest him and come. Now, I could have gone. I'm in a soldier's kit, and I would have gone there. And I would have arrested. The whole stadium would have lynched us. Frankly, it is a match, and he's part of the thing. So when I went and saw the number of people around the stadium, there were about 7,000 people there, and I knew I identified that guy. So immediately we changed track, and we went and changed into our games kit. We also took football and started practicing, and then after we waited for the match to get over. And then when the match was over, we had this, we said we are from the army team and we'd like to also practice with you all. And so then we talked to this guy. He said, yeah, sure. And I said, we have a lot of, things for you to give, which is illegal. We said, we just took him around, and then we got chatting with him and just abducted him and disappeared. Nobody knew. We talked about, our men were all playing outside in a football match. And I and other 3 people were there. We said we want to work out. So what I'm saying is we need to have tact in how do we approach understanding that violence is inevitable and how do we actually do. And I think the key comes in anticipation, in preparing for a contingency. And I think much of that depends on how your administration manages to prevent a violent workplace. The responsibility rests on them to minimize the impact of violence that can be had, and that can come from a lot of measures that can be put in place by studying. And I think that so I'd now end here, and I would like to wait and ask you if there's any questions would you like me to answer, because I was told that you would have some questions to ask, so I'll just have a look at this. So thank you very much for all the good comments you've given, Dr. Gladwin, Dr. Abhishek, Dr. Akshay, Dr. Jyoti. It's a big honor for me to be addressing you all. Honestly, it's not something that I'm saying because I stand here today. It's an example of what doctors can do to you. I was given up for dead, so I really owe you, Dr. Shailini. Thank you for connecting me, Dr. Gautam. It's indeed very kind. And so if there be any questions to understand how we can actually, you have any questions that I can answer, you must let me know. I worked on a couple of things related to health. I understand health is going to be healthcare, not just medical care. Healthcare is going to be one of the greatest industries that we, which is never going to go out of fashion. Automobiles can go out of fashion, or the food, but there are certain fundamental things like healthcare, education, food industry will never go. And healthcare is $1 billion, is I think the #1 industry after agriculture. So we need to focus on understanding how we can make this place more, and everyone is going to need it. And in our country, we really have a lot of. I have a question from Dr. Jyoti. She says that how does an army officer maintain his calm during incidents of professional violence? Like I told you, we were all trained. We were prepared. Unlike you all, you're prepared to actually. You need an intellectual level. Yours is where you apply your mind to a situation at hand. We are prepared in the business of violence. We are trained to use our weapons. We are trained to kill. So we understand. So we are already in a very aggressive environment. And colleagues that we have are also pretty aggressive. Their testosterone and their, all those things that hormones are bloody active. And so we are kind of conditioned already to live in whereas yours is a very cerebral environment where you all, think. So I think the difference comes in is that we prepare ourselves for violent situations and we are actually trained to handle them. Now, how you can actually adapt to those kind of violent situations is to anticipate. One of the things that, all that, I remember Colonel Tate telling me that your strength doesn't lie in your muscles or in your biceps or whatever. All the strength, Pillay, that you're holding on lies between these 2 ears. All your power. And remember that no one can harm you without your own consent. Now, when I got these bullets in and I was losing my life, I was told that a lot of people die of shock. Very few people die of actually, this thing. If you have a control over your thing where you realize that I am not going to give up, and I'm going to this thing. So that is the key. And I remember my father telling me, I was very young, and he's been a veteran of 1948 war in Kashmir. And against the Pakistani British combined. Then he was in 62, then he was in 65 and 71. So one of the first things that he told me that remember that even if you're not brave, act brave, because no one can tell you the difference. So I think one of the key thing is to understand that you have to remain calm and you have to appear unruffled. And that is what is the key to your understanding. Like the person gets intimidated. It's like, who blinks first. When you stand, you've seen videos of people, of animal kingdom where, they don't back off, and then that lion or the tiger just backs off and goes away. So I think the key is to understand that no one can harm you without your own consent. And even if you have to apply your mind and anticipate and be prepared for, I think that is the key. Like if you had an incident, you should be aware that people are trying to stalk you, to harm you and everything. I think vigilance is the key. And I think that is And that is. Now the question from Akshay is, what is the best way of communication? How to win the confidence of others? I would like to say, you know, you doctors, I also meet a lot of people who suddenly in their fame and they become very famous, and when you meet them and then they have a kind of an arrogant attitude. I think the key to anything is communication. Like General Tiwari would tell my mother, who wasn't really well, that you look so good, you look so cheerful. He used to communicate so well, like on a human to human basis. It was not like put him on some those kind of, there were no very technical jargons that were used and put all that, and he would communicate and tell her the course of treatment, tell me who was around her the course of her treatment. Even when I went to the hospital and my own experience, they would tell me what I am, like, you're lucky, you come here, you're going to get better. And it is the best thing is to be calm and be communicative. And communication comes from seeing the other person not from a pedestal, but as an equal level, to come down to my level of intellect. I'm not understanding the way you're seeing it, but you got to come down to my level and tell me, hello sir, this is how it is, this is what has happened to your mother's body, and this is what we are going to do. And don't give us hope right in the beginning. Don't say that we had, and since my mother, he said it's a hopeless condition, but we're going to give our best, and your mother is a woman who's going to fight. So that put a lot of emphasis on the patient herself to fight back. And now she goes around on a wheelchair from being a bedridden patient. She's been able to recover quite a bit. I think the key is not to be very standoffish and aloof, and that it comes, arrogance comes in our own customs and systems. When people wield power, they become arrogant, because absolute power corrupts absolutely, and you really become arrogant. And so I remember a doctor who was treating me and suddenly became a big shot, and then I went and met him. He said, I don't do roadside consultations, come and take an appointment and meet me. Now this man, I've seen him, like when he was a thing, and suddenly he becomes so big. I really thought that, but that's not the way. I think the key is to communicate like a human being. After all, it's not like, you're actually seeing it. I can't remove my heart like a spare wheel and take it, hello, jara puncture wale se repair kara ke lao. Yeah, mera carburetor ko repair karke lao. It doesn't go to, you are actually working on me. So you need to communicate to me and see me as a human being. I think that is the key. When you communicate with a person, when I see a person in a counterinsurgency situation, when I have a weapon and he doesn't have a weapon, I don't talk with a weapon pointed at him. I talk through him as a protector. I speak to him, hello, आपको इधर नहीं होना चाहिए, आप इधर क्यों हैं बताएंगे. You understand, there is a way and a method that we actually do. So the key is to be humane, to be approachable, not to be arrogant. Your intelligence and level is extremely high. The person who's communicating to you, his intelligence level is slightly low because he's a patient. He's come to you for treatment. You are the giver. I am the recipient. So treat me like that. Don't be. I think the key is lying to understand, to come down to a level, because you are there in a pedestal. We look up to you. So please come down and communicate as you would, to a person who looks up to you. Let that respect for you, that not go up to a level that makes you feel, because then it doesn't take time for it to fall. So, and the confidence to others comes from being highly amongst your own peers. It comes from not networking and knowing the minister or whatever. It comes from your own level of competence in your job. You're highly proficient, you're up to date in your knowledge, your intelligence, you have an empathy, you understand the other person, you are communicating with your colleagues and and the patients and everything. You are able to place yourself in their shoes and communicate. I think that is the key. And once you have that integrity where you don't hide your failures, you don't say that, okay, we did this, you set a very high standard. I think that automatically translates into a kind of a confidence that you can actually earn of the others. Yeah, Dr. Sachar Saurabh asked me, why is that violence is increasing? It's, I think first and foremost, it is increasing, and the thing is, because our patience is getting too low. People are getting highly, like we're living in this age of instant fast food and everything is available, we worried about downloads and everything. In a way, this corona is such a good thing that has put us all back, into our cages and telling us that you can't really, I think this impatience that has come up in the recent past is making us expect great results without putting in really, and not able to empathize with that, and seeing this violence is one of the reasons is that. And secondly, the healthcare systems and privatization that has happened has earlier healthcare was it was restricted to government and officials and missionary hospitals and everything. Then this privatization led to this is my assessment. I'm not saying in any way because private corporations run on profits, and in their quest for profit they charge exorbitantly, so that pain's there. And then when you feel that you don't get when you pay such a huge amount and you don't get those kind of outputs that you desire and this thing, you naturally tend to feel cheated or aggrieved or whatever. And that's the reason why probably this violence is increasing in greater measures. And of course that the accessibility and then mushrooming and the people getting more and more doctors being churned, I think that's one of the reasons why violence is increasing amongst the people. And I know there are two questions about Saurabh. How to handle conflict situation in the organization, and what do you do in a situation of mob violence and casualty? They're simply not ready to listen. I agree with you. This Dr. Ravi is asking this question about mob violence and emergency situations and the casualty. I think the key lies in the administration. The precaution has to be taken at the gates where you don't prevent other than the patient to enter. Like now during Corona, I was trying to go to the RR hospital, and they just wouldn't let us unless the screening was done. So I think the investment has to be done in terms of putting more people to check. If metros can be checked and if entry into malls can be checked, I think you can also check, because mob violence, you can never dictate how the mob would behave, how a casualty this thing can take up. So I think the most important thing is to control the crowd at the entry. All potential, you should have cameras all around, and there should be barricades where you prevent people from crossing certain lines. So like now when I tried to get into the hospital, I was stopped. My car was detached there, then we had to go into the thing, one waiting area was there. So in a way it is a good thing to screen people who actually finally reach you. You should be behind layers of barricades. It's like when you go to the airport, you have so many levels of check, and I think that kind of a thing has to be there, whether it's a private or a public hospital. Investment in this, because it takes millions of rupees to make a doctor. It just takes few seconds to destroy a doctor and his life, and and just all the thing that has happened. So if you preemptively invest in those kind of things to prevent access to the potential, because mobs, you can't define one small thing, and it is a very infectious thing, by the way. It's so easy to inspire people to violence. That's why if you say to someone, said, okay, hello, let's these guys are in danger, man, come on, let's go and break them, you'll find 100 people volunteering. But if you say, hello, yaar, these migrant laborers are going without food, can you come? You will find, yeah, ye le yaar, 100 rupees, main nahi aa raha. But if you want to go and do some violent activity, you will find 1,000 people coming with you. So I think you must understand that there is this psychology, and the way to break it is to break the mob up into separate, so they don't communicate with each other. The patient has reached, patient and his co-people. I think that is the only way you can, otherwise there's no way you can actually handle mob reaction. And the problem is the problem lies in the administration, who fail to provide those covers that are required. And the next question is, how do you handle conflict situation in the organization? See, that comes down to interpersonal relationship, and it requires a lot of skills. Every organization, whether it is a private or a public or a government or education, everything has conflict between people, and they do have issues with each other. And I think the key lies in interpersonal skills, developing your own skills and your ability to communicate, to identify. And that is where leadership comes into the key position. A leader who is in an important position, who controls a thing, has to be a person with competence. He should be able to identify. And right now, when you are in a position, even if you're supervising someone, you should make sure that he's capable of handling, because you don't want a problem. People tend to create, even whether it's a political party or whether it is a business house or a system, they don't create the next generation of leaders. And I think the key lies in understanding, devolving, communicating, and periodically meeting. And then if there's a problem with each other, you should actually just reach out to that person and say, hello boss, you seem to have this problem with me. One-to-one, can we discuss it? I think there's nothing better than going and talking face-to-face with a person. And so once, twice, he might still indulge. And then I think that key is the ability to face anyone in this situation. Now the next question, Saurabh, is again, in a conflict situation, how do you project your junior colleagues and subordinates? I think one of the key things that we learn in the army is we take all the blame and we share all the credit. So, one of the things is to reward people and recognize your subordinates very correctly. So when a subordinate has done a good job, you don't say that I've done it. I don't get a Paramveer Chakra for Captain Vikram Batra going and capturing Tiger Hill. Captain Vikram Batra got the Paramveer Chakra because he did the. So I think we need to protect not only our professional competence of our subordinates, we also need to protect, we should be there in the front lines to control the situation. Probably when you're a senior doctor, you have experience in handling patients, you've seen similar cases before. You should be there in the forefront to allow them, crowd control. It comes when you say that, please wait, I speak to me, I am the person in charge. You take away you protect your subordinates from being this thing. And I think, like I told you, the key lies in segregating your violent mob. So you have to break your opposition. You take them piecemeal. I think one of the fundamental things is in the organization that your hospital should have, where they don't allow too many people into areas where they're not supposed to be. So you need to, I think this corona has identified methods to segregate people very early. And I think that's a very, very important thing, because you're not trained to handle weapons and violence. You are doctors. You apply your mind. You deal with minute instruments. You get into, 1,000 wired. It's like getting into this. You guys are not meant for violence. So I think the key lies in the hospital administration to create those kind of a thing where you are really not exposed directly to, so there has to be layers of barricade. And then I think that is the important. And now we've seen it happen in corona. People are segregated, you're allowed, and then you tell them that these zones, only patients and one attendant can go across, and then there's no. And the billing section also, it shouldn't be like, where they start beating up people and all that. There has to be clear cut where that offense can't be taken. I think that is key. You go to all these temples in Tirupati and all, you put them in cages and things like that. You've seen the way that they make you into queue systems and things like that. I think that is to understand crowd management, to understand how do you do. I think that is because as a doctor, I don't anticipate, even though you may be a black belt in taekwondo or karate, you really can't handle that kind of a situation. So the best is to create a situation where you're not exposed to the violence. So you segregate that, and that lies on the hospital administration. Hello boss, we are not going to be functioning in this kind of a thing. All this epidemic act notwithstanding, and all the prevention of violence, all those things that are there, it really doesn't translate into protection for us. So I think that is the key. And how do I handle conflict? And did I answer your question, Saurabh, or would you like me to? Is there any other questions? Because I was told that it is going to be half an hour, so I'm open to more questions. And So finally, since there are no more questions, I would say that, you know, there's nothing greater than being a doctor, because even today I am in touch with all my doctors who've been who've been like, and I think you also value that small little thank you notes that you get from your patients, and it makes you feel good, from an illiterate man, and sending a small little note. And I think there's nothing greater, because, today this corona should have indicated to you that what is mattering in your life. It's not the number of cars that you have, it's lying in your thing. It's not the money that you have. It's the goodwill that you've generated, and you live in the hearts ever eternally for those people whom you've helped. I think that is where your balance should be. I think that is the key that you have, even when you become famous and powerful. Remember that. It's a great honor for me to have been associated with somebody like you. You are on the front lines. You are our saviors. And आप लोगों को सब मेरे दिल से हार्दिक, I really feel indebted to you for all the great job that you're doing, staying away from your family, looking after people whom you have no reason to come and look after. They're never going to come back, but you've been selfless. So I really want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for what you all, not just doctors, the nurses, even the cleaning boys, the sanitation, everyone who's been around, cleaning up the dormitories, cleaning up the beds, changing the sheets. You all are like in the front lines for us, fighting for this. And I'm really indebted to you for, on behalf of a community of Indians and people all around the world, thank you very much for being what you are. Thank you so much. Thank you, Saurabh. Is there anything else I can do? So I want to ask your permission from, should I sign off or? Hi, Saurabh. Should I continue or should I sign off? Or? Okay, I hope it is okay. Thank you.